You met him?
Yeah.
So he's moderating. This is about the. To get back into the forum, the vault ASAP. We'd like to start the next panel at 11:50 a.m. Thank you very much. Again, for any last stragglers out there, we're starting the next panel at 11:50 a.m. So if you could be in your seats right now, that would be phenomenal. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to get us kicked off here. Welcome back from the networking and break portion of our event. We heard some really excellent conversations, some great opportunities to connect with our partners who are here, who have done so much to help us through this process, and the alumni and individuals who are in the room who are generously giving their time to connect with you, the students. We are so grateful to all of them. A round of applause for them, please. Our next panel focuses on the future commercialization of women's sports. It has become evident that the next frontier of sports investment remains in the women's game, and the next generation of sports leaders will consist of women more than ever before. It's critical that we understand how we've reached this level of popularity within the arena of women's sports and what it will take to move forward with continued investment in the space. Our speakers, Olivia Hancock, the co-founder and CEO of Bios Media, Sascha Malice, head of Overtime Select and director of content operations at Overtime, Lola Schumacher, Wisconsin volleyball student athlete, and Coach Kelly Sheffield, the head coach of Wisconsin volleyball, will discuss their unique experiences in both women's sports and as women in sports, and discuss their views on the future of this industry. We also have Rachel Cohen with one of our student org partners, the Associated Students of Women in Sports Media. She's a UW student and also a sideline reporter here at Big Ten Network in Wisconsin. We are thrilled to have her. Without further ado, please welcome them to the stage.
Is it working? Testing? All right. Perfect. I guess we just want to start off with everyone going through. I know we got a little introduction, but introducing yourselves.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sascha Malice. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 2017, and I'm so happy to be back here. I currently work at Overtime. For those of you who don't know what Overtime is, it is a sports media company for the next generation of sports fans, but we also are a media company that's investing in the next generation of athletes. So we create sports leagues to better amplify the athletes that are in high school, but also prepare them for the next level of their careers. So Overtime Select is the business within Overtime that I run. It is a women's basketball league for elite high school women athletes. We have 64 of the top girls that play in our league, and they are remarkable. But the best part about it is that we're giving them NIL experiences and exposures to be the next Caitlin Clarke, Paige Beckers, Angel Reese's of their generation. So outside of the fact that they play against each other, and we give the 64 girls the opportunity to play against different circuits. So typically it's like Adidas and Nike that are separated from each other. We give all these girls the opportunity to play against each other, so the best of the best have the opportunity to compete. So my journey at Overtime has been remarkable. It's been almost 6 years, and it's really been so special to be a part of.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Hancock. I actually graduated from UW about 3 years ago. I run a content studio in sports. We work with brands, properties, media companies to help them create content and storytelling activations that maximize partnership value for their partners and sponsors. I was a Wisconsin Athletics intern when I was in school here, so shout out the athletic department. And while in school, I also created a media company called Uncut Madison with Dana Recchi, who won the first national championship in women's volleyball history here with Coach Kelly Sheffield, and Mumajong Mehta, who is now a Cincinnati Bengal. And yeah, that's gonna spend the last 5-6 years in media and doing a lot with women and volleyball players like Lola here.
Hi everyone, I'm Lola Schumacher. I'm in my second semester here at Wisconsin as a freshman. I'm on the volleyball team, and this is my head coach, Kelly.
Hi, I'm Lola's coach, Kelly. And I've been here since 2013.
Awesome. I guess to kind of open this up, how did we get here? I mean, we've really seen the rise of women's sports, especially in the most fast few years. Like, how did we get here? What factors kind of drove that?
Specifically in women's sports, right? It's been such a huge momentum around the product, but it's been happening, and I think that that's the biggest thing that people don't recognize, that it's been growing. Wisconsin women's volleyball is a perfect example of it. You see it with like UConn women's basketball and all of these programs that have really been like slowly itching to get to the point. So at least at Overtime, like, we knew it was happening, and we started to create a business model around women's sports before the things like Unrivaled launch, which is a new women's basketball league for pros, and other elements. So it's really been ingrained, and I think the best thing about women's sports right now is that there's so much excitement about it and around it, but the girls themselves are so ready and so excited to have opportunities in NIL, and I'm sure you're sensing it too on the volleyball side, as well as you being a student athlete, like having the opportunity to learn and grow your personal business and brand. It's unlike anything right now, and it's really special.
Yeah, I think just, you touched on it, but the media exposure and investment to have these sports games visible, I think, is the most foundational component to all this. I think, I always think it's kind of funny when I get the question, like, are you a women's sports fan? And it's like, well, I'm a sports fan. And when Liberty and Aces are playing on TV and I can watch it on ESPN, I'm gonna turn it on because it's highly competitive. They're jawing at each other, right? Like, it's just a good sports game to watch. And I think historically it's been really hard to see and be able to watch those games until recently. There's a major NWSL media rights deal. There's a March Madness now. The women's basketball is now called March Madness. It wasn't before. And so I think we now fans have access to watch women's sports and consume it and realize that it's just as, if not more entertaining than the male counterpart sport in some sense. So yeah, I think that's just the most foundational element of it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what they said. I think it's super important to realize that, like she said, people are finally engaging and interacting with women's sports on TV, on social media, whether that's on or off the court. But I think the biggest thing for me and my teammates and other women in sports is that it's very validating. I think being able to connect with people such as everybody in this room and reaching out through all these Instagram or social media platforms, especially amazing people like Paige and how they connect with us, is super validating, like we said, because of the struggles and kind of how we went unnoticed. And now to be able to say that, yeah, I'm on the Wisconsin women's volleyball team and have people kind of be amazed and happy to meet us is super cool. And being able to be in that situation and have Kelly being by my side and by all of us kind of ready to help us interact with all you guys and all these people is super cool, and being able to progress our name and brand.
I don't know if anybody out here has watched the movie Moneyball, but there's a scene in there where they're all around a conference table and they're trying to put a team together, and they're just talking about, who are they going to go after, and well, this guy's, has got a girlfriend, and this one, I don't know, whatever it is. It's all this, this old school feel type of stuff of how they're making decisions. It kind of makes me think about the first few years I was here. And there was an older sports writer that was covering a lot of the sports around the state. And every year around New Year's Eve, he would say the top sports stories in the state of Wisconsin. And one year, all 10 of them were men's. Another year, women got a token one. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, man, our women's hockey team just won a national championship here. We just went to the Final Four, and those are two that we're just rattling off. But I think one of the things that's been really important is getting some newer people involved in how this, showing the sport. I think another part that's been pretty big is when the newspapers have stopped just when they started putting stories online, and they could see what stories are getting clicks. So they're getting real data rather than that data in Moneyball of old men sitting around the table just spouting stuff off. And when you're seeing that some of these women's teams, that people are opening this up and people are coming in to the buildings and watching in person, there's a light bulb that's kind of going off with a lot of people that says, hey, maybe we can make some money in here. Maybe some companies corporate America needs to get invested. And it's been a huge difference in the past 10 or 15 years of being able to get rid of the old way of how women's sports has been looked at, and a newer way of not only is it athletic and it's impressive of what these guys are doing, but people actually want to pay attention to this.
And I mean, you guys talk about how the media is most important, the viewership. How do we grow the media coverage, and what are you guys doing in your roles to help do that?
Well, Overtime's whole business is social media. So we have 100 million followers across all of our platforms. And we have specific platforms that are dedicated to specific sports and models. So, for example, Overtime WBB follows women's basketball and generic women's sports. Overtime Select is specific and primary for our high school women's basketball league. But we also really try to hone in on the personalities that are within our league. So, for example, even pre our league, Flau'jae Johnson was one of our athletes that played in Overtime takeover events, which is essentially like an all-star weekend. And she actually says that her participation in Overtime events is the only thing that compared and prepared for her to play at the national championship. So the media, the lights, the cameras, all of the activity that's happening within our building was the first and only thing that prepared her for playing on the national stage when they won. And that's really crazy to hear, right? But our biggest thing is exposure and providing athletes as much exposure as possible, whether it's YouTube, live streaming all of our content on TikTok and Instagram. There's so many mediums to get content out now, which there wasn't before.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's really important around like the conversation around the game. I think historically, a journalist for that was covering women's sports was the intern, or it was someone that was new and didn't have the expertise that the person that was covering men's basketball was. And so I think there's this infrastructure being built, and that still needs to continue to grow. That's supporting the conversation around the games. That's like we need to have there needs to be rivalries in women's sports. There needs to be banter. There needs to be criticism of bad play. Or I think there's historically it's been obviously it's incredibly important to uplift women, but I think we should talk about women's sports similarly to how we talk about men's sports. And I talk to women in the W. I talk to coaches, and I think of course fans shouldn't be like hating on character or looks. But I think there's a lot of players that say, hey, yeah, hold me accountable. If I had a bad game, if Megan Rapinoe's game at, towards the end of her career wasn't a strong performance, like let's talk about if that affects the legacy that that she has when she walks off the field. So I think, that's what I really thought about when, you shared that. And I'd say lastly, on the media front, just continuing to put these games in primetime spots and like I said earlier, accessibility. I don't know if anyone in the audience works at the MLS. If so, I apologize. But the MLS Cup had about half the viewers that the NWSL Cup did this past year. So NWSL was averaging around 1 million at any given moment during the broadcast, and the MLS was averaging about 500,000. So I just think it's the appetite is there, and like people say in the industry, if you build it, they'll come. And so I think just continuing to put these women in these games in spots where we can watch them and celebrate them and get excited about just the talent and the entertainment that we get to be a part of by being a fan.
I think I biggest relate to what she said about how Overtime has 100 million followers. That's a big deal. And I think realizing that that's hard. It's honestly kind of part of our lifestyle. I mean, our team and Kelly and our staff talk about how school, volleyball, nutrition, energy and showing yourself up every day. But NIL always gets thrown in there because it is part of our daily lives and it is part of how we interact with people. And these things take work and it's hard. And being able to put yourself out there and have people view you as how people want to see you, and that is hard also. So realizing and taking ownership that one of my biggest roles is representing Wisconsin as a university, but also as being on the volleyball team. And that's something that I know myself and my team take a lot of pride in. And showing myself through social media and through everything I post, what I comment, whether that's what I like, is people notice that, and being aware and being kind of on your toes at all time, and almost having eyes in the back of your head when you realize, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that, or even what you repost, realizing that everybody's always watching. So I think that's a big thing that people take into consideration, is that these things are hard, and posting every week is hard, and being able to be like, wow, I really want to post this, but having that voice in the back of your head, what is this person going to say about me? My teeth look yellow, I don't know. But something about how putting yourself out there can be hard and scary, and realizing that you're doing this for you and for your representation of the university and as an athlete is pretty cool.
I loved what you were saying about the, creating rivalries and not it just being, everything positive about the women because they can't take anything challenging. Being able to create rivalries. It's we just got done watching. It seems like everything. There's a ton of information right now about the Lakers and Celtics rivalry of the '80s and stuff, but you loved one and you hated the other, and how much of that is there right now with women's sports? And I think that's kind of another level of stirring the passion where it's, I'm really passionate about, and I can't stand those guys. That would be good, right? And those are things that you can sell. I had another point, but I'm going to rest on that because I totally forgot what else I was going to say there.
I hate watch Nebraska volleyball. Like, I'll turn on Nebraska when they're not playing Wisconsin to be like, I hope Nebraska loses.
Yeah.
And that's really what we need to. I think that's a good thing. I think that,
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of people that turned on the Eagles-Chiefs game, and obviously the fans in Philadelphia, fans of Jalen Hurts, were rooting for the Eagles, but there's a lot of people that just didn't want to see the Chiefs win a third time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what needs to transpire and translate into over to the women's game to kind of take it to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
You took the words right out of my mouth with the Wisconsin-Nebraska. I can't stand Nebraska. How do we grow those rivalries? Like, I know putting them in the forefront on social media, everything, but how do we continue to do that?
All right. So I just remember what I was going to say, but I think it touches on that. Thank you. BTN is playing in our office suite constantly around the clock, and it seems like once a week you're seeing Ben Bruss half-court shot. Anybody in the Kohl Center when he hit that shot? Everybody's young. We've got an old person back there, but I'm sure a lot of you guys that are Badgers have seen that. How often are we going back and doing that with women's sports? Of legacies, of creating things, moments over time, and replaying that. That I think that's another next step of celebrating the history and the traditions that have come before players like Lola right now. Because there's been, this isn't people might be opening their eyes a little bit more to women's sports, but women's sports didn't just start, right? It's been going on a long, long time, and it'd be pretty cool to turn on the TV and see some legendary players, some legendary games, and some different sports popping up there. I think that's another big step.
Actually, the only time recently that I've seen that is when Diana Taurasi retired, and there were all of the posts of her kissing Simone Augustus on the cheek when they were competitive. But you're absolutely right. For her to retire and for those moments to only resurface in that moment, even the Caitlin Clarke Angel Reese rivalry has simmered, right? And it's so important to continue to build that up. You'll start to see it in women's basketball with Juju Watkins, who's clearly very competitive, and Paige Beckers, but there's not, you talk about UConn and South Carolina, but that's really, it's not at the forefront of what it was with Caitlin and Angel. So they need to figure out how to continue to get competitive there. And I think to your point and your question, it all comes down to personalities and how people market. It's so necessary to build, and this goes to your point of NIL and having a presence on social media, but if you can build personalities and have people care about you, that's the biggest issue, I think, right now in women's sports, that you continue to need the face at the forefront of it, and it's still disconnected and really only getting it in specific areas of basketball and soccer, and you need it in volleyball, and you need it in other women's sports.
And I think college, on universities, campuses where this is ripe for growth, because there's already, if you're not a Chicago Sky fan right at the moment, you then have to become a Chicago Sky fan. But if you're a Wisconsin fan, or your parents went to Wisconsin, there's already an association there. And I think about the biggest mistake that I made. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I was a student here was I didn't go to a Wisconsin volleyball game until my sophomore year. And I was like, oh, what have I been missing? I mean, when I think about my time in college, the only time where bars were packed and there were people jumping up and down and you saw Instagram posts of bars going crazy and beer in the air was when they won the national championship. That didn't happen in football when I was here. That didn't happen in basketball. And if you saw those videos, you would have thought, that's got to be a basketball team must have just won the Final Four or made it to the Final Four. And so I think, this might be jumping ahead in the conversation, but I think non-biased, not because they're up here, but women's volleyball in college is incredibly ripe for growth and competition because you already have baked in rivalries of Kentucky and Nebraska and Wisconsin and TCU and Texas, but just the level of play and competition is unmatched. So I think just as Unrivaled and these other properties grow in the professional game in women's sports, I think it's just as important for there to be a conversation around how we're growing this in the collegiate space.
Are there any big misconceptions that you think investors have? I mean, is there a reason why you think that the big women's games aren't being put on national coverage?
I actually think you're starting to see a change, and it at the beginning was likely because they didn't get eyeballs. Women can't dunk. It's not as exciting. Like those were really what the misconceptions were. At least from my experience within launching Overtime Select, we launched the property in the league because we were getting an influx of brands that wanted to sponsor and be involved in growing women's sports. So we've definitely noticed we have Gatorade, Adidas, State Farm, Invisalign, FDA, Army National Guard, so many brands that are wanting to be involved and invest. And we just actually did a big deal with the NWSL, which you and I were just talking about, where we'll have the ability to go to women's soccer matches and promote them on Overtime's channels of all of our followers. So I really do think the investment is starting to get there. And I still think it goes back to the point of building personalities because brands want to invest in people and people that fans care about.
We're on TV a lot. I mean, it's, I think the last 2 years, 3 matches on Fox, 1 or 2 on NBC. Big Ten Network is unbelievable in their coverage, not just of our program, but our entire sport. I think they probably have tripled the amount of matches in the past 5 years that have been going. So they definitely have led the way, and I think, but I don't see it nationally. I think I see it pockets where it's covered really well.
And then kind of shifting to being a woman in sports, what would you guys say the biggest barriers you're faced, and even Lola, being an athlete as well? Are there any specific barriers that you feel like you've had to cross over?
Yeah, I think an example is kind of this room, this conference, whatever this is. I think the biggest thing I like to say is that we say all these things, we have these talks, we have these panels, and we get a bunch of head nods and we're promoting ourselves, but it's kind of the next step. Just because we all are in here and we're all for women's sports, it doesn't change. I think taking the next step and realizing that we're gonna do something about this and we're gonna keep this growth is the biggest thing that is validating and is empowering. And like we've all been saying, this is an insane growth that we're creating, but that it won't change tomorrow. And I think, like you said, as the question, what is the barrier? And as I think it is that mindset of, oh, I reposted this video, I'm helping the case. That's not true. I think the biggest thing is that staying with it and being loyal to what you want and what you want to see in the future. And that's the biggest thing I think is important because it takes time. And like I said, it is hard and growth is hard and there's ups and downs and sideways, there's a lot. But how we stick through it and how we ask questions and promote everybody throughout this whole situation is what's going to help break those barriers.
Yeah, I don't really feel like there's in my experience, a ton of barriers. I think, and in this conversation so far, we've talked about how can we get better, but I think we're at such a moment to celebrate how far women's sports has come, and that we're having this conversation here, not because, oh, we have to include women's sports or because it's charity or because, we have to be diverse, but because it is good business. And people realize that. And so I think while we talk about like where we can go, I think we have to recognize that there's never been a better time to be a female athlete, to be a female sports team, to be a female sports fan. Like this is it. We have it. And so I think similarly for people that are looking to get into the industry, I have found, I'm out of everyone here, like the youngest that's graduated and in the industry, that if you put in the work and if you network, like you'll be able to carve your way. I think then the only thing you have to prepare for is still some people thinking that you don't know as much about sports as you know. I was in a conversation just a few weeks ago and someone told me they did a partnership with John Morant. They said, yeah, we did a partnership with John Morant on the Memphis Grizzlies in the NBA. And I was like, yeah, I know who John Morant is, So I think just, always being able to have a little bit of thick skin when people might doubt your knowledge of sport is, imperative being a woman in the industry. But ultimately, I think there's never been a better time. And people in the industry are valuing women on the business side, and they're valuing the women in the jerseys as well. So it's really cool to see.
I mean, you couldn't have said it better. There are moments. Everyone has their ups and downs. Like, I wouldn't sit up here and lie to everyone and say that there aren't challenges. And, like, sometimes you feel defeated and sometimes it's really hard. But to your point, like, having thick skin, networking, having good people in your corner. I'm really lucky that I have 2 male bosses at Overtime, and they're wonderful. Like, I couldn't have asked for better people in my life and helping me on this journey. I also have amazing mentors and amazing female mentors in the space that have really helped guide me and helped me grow throughout my career. But yeah, it's hard sometimes when people don't recognize or think that, like, you know what you're talking about, or you didn't play football, so you can't know football, things like that. But for the most part, I think that my biggest advice in general is keep your head down. Like, don't talk. There's so many people. This business is small, but everyone knows each other. And if you work hard and keep your head down, I'm fully confident that you can get to a position where you feel comfortable, where you have growth potential and ability to succeed.
And you guys talked about the momentum that we've had and how far women's sports have come. How do we continue that and ensure a long-term success?
You said it. Women's sports are good for business. They are. Like, that is point blank. Women's sports are good for business, and you're sensing it now. The market is sensing it, and it's just keeping up and staying ahead of everything that's coming, and continuing to grow the different women's sports platforms, leagues, the women within the sport. Obviously, we start in high school because we want to amplify and grow these high school women before they get to their next level of their journeys. But point blank, it's really good for business, and it's important that everybody gets on board.
Perfect. And we want to open up if anyone has any questions.
So I think in recent years, we've kind of seen in the NBA at least, like this declining viewership overall. However, like I look to the WNBA and I think recently it's been thriving. How do you kind of make sure that it doesn't experience something similar to the NBA to where like other sports are kind of cannibalizing that viewership a little and you have, like you said earlier, like that long-term success?
I mean, I don't know the answer. I think if we knew the answer, the NBA would have a bit more, like, I think they would have a bit more direction on what their, why their ratings are going down. I mean, there's more products. There's more things you can watch. There's, less cable. People aren't sitting down as much on their couch to watch TV. So, I mean, I don't know. It's really hard.
I think that people think the NBA can be very political, and that people can dictate rosters and how they move around the business there. I don't think it's like that yet in the WNBA, and I think that the WNBA, in order to really succeed, needs to focus on building their stars, and the NBA, I will say, has done a very good job at that. Like, it's clear you have LeBron James and you have Steph Curry and you have like very key stars. And I think it's imperative for the WNBA to really invest in somebody like Caitlin and the future girls that are coming out of college this year, because they're going to be the faces of that league, and the people that everybody in this room that are watching college basketball are going to invest in. But I don't think it's as political. And I think that likely is why people have engaged out a little bit of the NBA.
I'm going to redirect the question to Coach Kelly, because I'm curious, in that same conversation, we've seen this growth of women's volleyball in the last 7 years. That's been incredibly impressive. And you have been one of the leaders in that. And this team has been one of the leaders in that. How do you think that how do we sustain the growth that volleyball's had in the collegiate space, and how do you take it to the next level?
You have to be able to tell the stories. It's got to be more. Nothing is more important than the competition. But you've got to know people's stories. The WNBA, I mean, my goodness, Clarke's story has been told over and over and over by everybody. Well, there's a lot of players in the WNBA. You've got to have. I think an area of growth is pregame shows a lot more for a lot of these women's events, and talking about afterwards. What did you just see? What people that know the games. Being able to going into the game, what are some of the things to watch for? What are some of the things that makes this athlete or these athletes special? Afterwards, being able to talk about it. How many I'm watching right now on Netflix the story of the Olympic basketball. I don't know if anybody else has watched that. It's pretty darn good. But it's quite a few of the teams on the men's side. But you see very little of that of the women's side. So although there's been amazing growth, and it's good for business, and you see this explosion, I would say what is exciting for everybody, and what should be opening the eyes of even more people that are looking to invest, is how much more meat on the bone there is, if you will, of saying there's so much further that it can go. And I think it starts with being able to tell stories like you guys do.
Yeah, I think a great example, what you just shared, is, a Netflix documentary came out called Sprint before this previous Olympics. And I feel like it was the first time that I knew who Noah Lyles was before he ran. Yeah. It was, you kind of met the track and field athletes once they were running in their race in the Olympics. And when you said that, I thought about how cool it would have been going into these Paris games if we could have heard the story of the indoor women's volleyball team who just won their first gold medal ever in the country's history. And it was an amazing run that they had in the last Olympics. And it would have made, if you would have had that story to be able to consume that, and then you go to the Paris games, turn it on, and you're like, oh, Haley Washington, we just heard her story in that doc about the last games, And I think that's, when you say that, I want to kind of expand on that a little bit, just how you can picture it, and hopefully that's what we see for LA.
You mentioned a little bit about the overtime select and your growth of women's basketball. Here, sorry, I'm right here. So I'm just curious about, what are your plans for exploring or growing the game in other sports for women's sports? Like, is there any plans for soccer? I know you talked about your partnership with the NWSL, like the premium league for women's soccer at the youth level is the ECNL. Is there any chance like you could branch out in there and give them more coverage? And I'm sure Lola can probably talk to this about like the women's volleyball and growing and getting more eyes on youth women's volleyball.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, to your point, we just launched a partnership with the NWSL. We had a partnership with NBC Sports this year for the Olympics and being able to cover Olympic athletes. We just launched a partnership with the ATP for tennis, and we're working with Naomi Osaka yesterday. So we're definitely trying to expand into other avenues. Overtime's bread and butter has been built on basketball, and now that the company is established, right, like it's been a startup and now we're kind of getting into the year 6 to 7 of the business, absolutely considering expanding. I actually think something that we haven't discussed much is flag football, and that is really on our radar right now. Overtime has OT7, a men's 7-on-7 football league, and a partnership with the NFL as well. So we are really heavily looking into women's flag and seeing if there's opportunity there and stories there. And regardless, like we're working with high school and college women's soccer players, maybe not necessarily in like a league format, but we are covering them consistently on Overtime FC and those platforms. So really trying to expand. And the influx of or deals that we get in from brands are kind of holistic. It's like, oh, we're looking for an athlete in soccer that's a woman. Oh, we're looking for a women's tennis player. So at least we can go out, and now that we've met, maybe we'll start getting some volleyball influx, and we can have some conversations. But yeah, it's been cool to see. Great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack Malloy. I'm a first-year undergrad here at Madison, and you guys talked earlier in the panel about how marketing comes down to personalities, and especially in the realm of women's sports, there's a lot of evolving personalities, such as the Caitlin Clarke, Angel Reese rivalry, Coco Gauff, Simone Biles, you name it. How do you guys change the way you market based on the evolving personalities that arise within the game of women's sports?
That's a great question. I think for me, personally, I don't change anything. I think the biggest thing about having a personality is that it's authentic and that it's just you. And for me, I think, especially as women in sports, it's not staged. Like the Angel Reese and the Clayton Clarke little rivalry, that's not fake. I genuinely think it's a true battle and a true rivalry and a true competition that everybody has. And when people see that, it's just fans and people who love this and engage in this, it helps. It doesn't change, but it just makes it more intense and more out there and more vocal. So I think personally, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I don't change. I think that I am who I am, and that's how I promote and show myself.
I love that. Yeah, I think athlete-led shows and athlete creating their own IP, you know, it's no longer let's have this athlete, their only opportunity to be in media and to hear their voice when their jersey is off is to see them in a studio show or them to be an anchor, right? Cameron Brink has her own podcast. Flau'jae Johnson has her own podcast. Paige Becker's done stuff with Overtime, right? Like,
Shador Sanders, we
yeah,
have all.
Yeah, so I think like there's like the infrastructure is now there from these media companies to really quickly elevate the voices of these women, of whoever is relevant, and tell that story really fast and in a compelling way. You know, you don't have to find a player who would be good as a sideline reporter, and that's the only way you're gonna see them off the court or off the field anymore. So I think it's just a really cool dynamic space to, you know, be coming into as aspiring sports business professionals, because there's so many ways to get involved with athletes and teams more than ever before.
Hi, all. Thank you. Mindy Perry, former track athlete here at the University of Wisconsin and current W Club board member. Last night, we covered a little bit of this topic on the future of Wisconsin athletics. And Deputy Athletic Director Mitchell Pinta, a member of the Varsity Collective, and then a gentleman named Casey Schwab moderated a topic around where we're going. So much disruption. A lot of that was football. But within every state of disruption, there's always opportunity. And one of the questions was also around Olympic sports and women's sports. And in a world where we need football to be successful to help fund so many opportunities at the collegiate level, in a world where there is so much importance on offering all 23 sports and the university's continued commitment publicly to make sure that 23 sports remain on the other side of disruption. But how do we help continue to be a leader in women's sports? And Mitchell Pinta mentioned Wisconsin has aspirations to be a leader in women's sports and referenced a lot of the volleyball and hockey. And today, even the conversations today around what is happening at the collegiate level and haloing to the professional opportunities for women, I think is driving a lot of that, whether it's professional women's hockey or the local Love Bee team here and some of the great names that you get to watch from college to go still play and have the media coverage. But my question for you is, there's more than just 2 or 3 women's sports when you look at all 23 sports at the University of Wisconsin. And if Wisconsin wants to be a leader in women's sports and capitalize on this billion-dollar industry opportunity, what does Wisconsin need to do to be truly a leader in all women's sports?
There's a lot there. It's we're about ready to see what I think maybe other than Title IX, the biggest shift in college sports that is still in front of us. I mean, you had the massive TV contracts, you had a lot of conference realignment. I think we'll probably see possibly another major shift, in about 5 years with conference realignment. But revenue sharing is a massive game changer, and it's forcing athletic departments, every athletic department, to look at what is their mission and what is important to them. And you will see, I think we're about ready to see an earthquake shift on. You will see teams, traditional teams in some sports that have been very, very good 5 years from now be a lot less, because the athletic department is not putting funds that direction. I think most athletic departments, when you're talking, have anywhere from maybe 17 to 36 sports. How do you choose to fund each of those sports? And I think you will see at most of these schools some sports that are elevated. Whatever that means. That could mean a lot of different things. And then I think you'll see some sports that will take a step back, maybe closer to a club model. I know we're fortunate, the leadership here at this particular school doesn't want to cut any sports. They want to, but if you are, most of these schools will have to be selective of, are they all the way in, or selective excellence, if you will. And if you're not doing that, then you're probably going to have mediocrity across the board. How do you? I think revenue sharing with athletes will be a game changer. Not every athlete will get it. Not even a majority of athletes will get it. Not a majority of sports at any school won't get it. But it's bad for business if you're only giving it to the male athletes, and I've not heard that yet from any school where they're doing that. Right out of the bat, do I think that male sports are going to get a majority of that money? I do, primarily because football, the revenue that they bring in, is massive. I'm sure those will continue to be lawsuits moving forward of what that split should look like. But I don't think you're going to see a one-size-fit-all, and I'm not sure there should be a one-size-fit-all. But there's, I can tell you with this as as a sport that will probably be participating. We'll be participating in revenue sharing. I'm thinking about it every single day. There is not a day that I don't think about the impacts of our team culture and what the future looks like and where our place is amongst the conference and nationally. I know talking with I've had a dinner and a lunch with a couple of the coaches that are also participating in that in our university within the past week. And one of them is in season and one of them has a parallel season to us. And they think about it every single day and the implications as well. I don't think any of us really know where it's going, but the possibilities for some, are very exciting.
And on that note, I think I can speak for all of us, say we're excited to see how women's sports, especially in college and in the professional leagues, continue to grow. I think that wraps up the time we have as well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rachel.
Another warm round of applause for our amazing panelists here today. Thank you very much. All right, really briefly, we're going to break into lunch here, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. There's some instructions here. So those of you in red lanyards who are students, your lunch buffet is going to be on this side of the room by the Mueller Sports Medicine tables. For industry professionals, so those wearing black lanyards, you'll be on this side. We'll have folks to help you facilitate in either direction. But just, again, those with red lanyards, students to the right over here, to my right, by Mueller Sports Medicine. Those with black lanyards over there. Our next panel's at 1:15 p.m., so if everyone could be back in their seats at 1:10, that would be phenomenal. Thank you very much.